So this is GPSTEC318, how partners use AWS IoT services and edge compute to grow.
Woo!
Yep.
Okay.
You want to introduce yourself, Kyle?
Oh, hey, I'm Kyle Lichtenberg. I lead our Global Growth Partner Organization.
And my name's Tom Jones. My nickname is Elvis, so both are appropriate for being here on stage at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So I'm a solution architect. I focus on our partner team.
I'm a solutions architect at heart, but I've got a business guy title and jacket. So we're going to talk about things like revenue and market growth and opportunities and that kind of stuff.
And we're hoping to make this talk a little bit fun. I love this quote. If anybody can tell me where this is from, you're awesome. Oh, I put it on the screen. Never mind. So everybody can tell where it's from.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies. No matter where you go, there you are. So why are we here? Right? Let's talk about the agenda. So this talk is really going to focus on 3 partners and 3 customers. And this, we're going to have some high-level architectural diagrams, and we're going to talk about that. But if you were expecting us to write code live on stage, this is not the right talk for that.
And we can do it if you want. It won't be pretty. It's not going to be what you're looking for.
We have done that before.
There's also going to be 3 quizzes. So pay attention. Details are important.
That's right.
If you get lost or confused, there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. First thing I'd kind of like to do here is make a bit of a plea, if you don't mind.
Well, before we go there, just a quick raise of hands. Who is this your first reInvent?
Nice.
All right. Actually, maybe about half the room. Well, welcome. Thank you for coming out here. And one more question. Who here has used AWS IoT? A few less hands that time.
Yeah.
Okay. So any of those folks that just raised their hands, if you have questions about AWS IoT, just hit them up after the talk. So we're going to talk about IoT. We're going to talk about 3 partners, 3 customers. We're going to talk a little bit about the architecture that those behind their solutions. We're going to talk about the business drivers for that. And, this is serious business, but we want to have a little fun, as you saw with our pictures kind of starting out. And, but you said you have a request.
Yeah. So we have a challenge in general as presenters in getting the right amount of feedback from folks. And this doesn't bother anyone more than my coonhound, Chester Copperpot. Chester's the most excited, happy character you will ever meet. He's got a huge heart. When you get home at night, does little tippy taps, and he's a coonhound, so he sings. But he gets extremely disappointed when we get low CSAT response rates. If he sees a 12% like last year, I don't know if he'll be able to pull through. So please, 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 keep in mind, Chester would love for you to respond to the surveys. Positive, negative, otherwise, let us know how he did.
Positive.
Positive, yeah, sorry. If it's positive, Chester loves 5s. It's just his thing. So please, please, please fill out your surveys at the end.
Let's roll on.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and Chester's very cute. So first we're going to talk about IoT. So back in the day, prior to IoT, if you wanted a cup of coffee, well, you got your coffee pot, you built a fire, it got the job done. Maybe it wasn't pretty. And maybe you had some grounds left in your cup, but you got that cup of coffee. But today, it's super easy and inexpensive to connect devices. And what we're going to end up with, and what we're already seeing, is the rise of the ubiquitous connected device.
Yeah. So with the ability to connect devices more easily, how many devices are we talking about here?
How many devices? That's a good question, Kyle. That was a good leading question.
Thank you.
So last year we had over 8 billion connected devices.
Connected devices.
And in 2020, they're predicting over 20 billion. And I like that because it's 20 billion devices and it's 2020. So it's like 20 cubed.
That's a huge number.
It is a huge number.
How does that compare to humans? That's a bunch per
You are leading me right along. So here's a graphic to represent that. So this is the number of humans on the planet, and we can see the projected growth over the next few years out to 2025. And here's the projection for connected devices. And you can see these folks are a little more aggressive, saying 30 billion in 2020, but I'm going to stick with that 2020 because I like that. So at least 20 billion devices in 2020. So there's a gigantic market opportunity around connected devices and IoT. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing all this hype.
Yeah.
Okay, so in summary, in 2017, we had more connected devices than we have people.
I think that makes good sense, right? Because we've got phones, we've got tablets, we've got computers. That's just per person. Plus the automated pieces, the.
So I've been to your house. I know you're responsible for a good percentage of that.
Yeah, it's not a whole number, but it's close.
Okay, so let's dive into some customer examples. And we're going to count down. We're going to start with number 3, and we're going to count down to number 1. So the first company I want to talk about is a chemical manufacturer. And this company is called FracChem. And the company makes chemicals. They wholesale those chemicals. They also make both standard and custom formulations. And they had some business outcomes that they wanted to focus on. So one of the things that they wanted to do was move from just being a supplier to being a managed service solution. And the way that they ended up doing that was by working with one of our partners called Annika, and I'll talk about them in just a second. But they wanted to lower their cost, they wanted to increase the quality of what they were producing, and maximize equipment life, because the equipment out in the field is very expensive. And so what they ended up doing was, instead of shipping liquid chemicals, they came up with a process for shipping dry chemicals and then on site mixing those. And that gave them the ability to adjust for water quality and other environmental factors. Okay, so they did that in conjunction with Annika. And Annika is one of our premier consulting partners. They have offices around the world, and they are a full spectrum integrator. As they were working with FracChem and hundreds of other IoT projects over several years, what they found is that there's a whole list of patterns and processes that are repeated across each one of their projects. So things like connectivity, right? Obviously you need some type of processing. The software distribution, the GPIOs, all of these things. So what they ended up doing is they stepped back and they said, all right, well, if we have all of these things that we have to solve for each one of our projects, what can we do to make it easier for customers to prototype, to get started? So what they created is a board called IoT Neum, and I have one here. So yeah, you can hold it up.
We'll have this up front here at the end if anyone wants to come see.
Yep.
But it's got a built-in connectivity with a radio here. It's got pins on the back. It's got breakout boards.
Yeah, full development kit, so you can get, and it's even got a breadboard in it, so
yeah, and you can
get started right away.
If you want to do BTLE, you can go LTE, you can go Wi-Fi. It's very extensible, and there's lots of different options you've got from an accessing and control perspective. But it can help you get a jump start on that project that you're running towards, and without needing to learn all these base pieces.
Well, and once again, the thing about Annika is that they're a consulting company, right? They don't sell hardware. They just built this to make it easier for you to prototype and build software solutions. And so you can prototype using this board very quickly, and then go to a contract manufacturer and have a custom board made.
So, but what do you do? Like, what makes this run on the back end? How does this function? Oh.
All right, so here's an architectural diagram of the Annika solution. And what we see here is, we've got devices. Let's see if this laser pointer works. So we've got devices out here. So those could be these IoT Neum boards or other devices. Talking over MQTT into the AWS cloud, which is this big box here. And then moving into AWS through the AWS IoT service, so we can do device management, as well as registering those devices, talking to the IoT rules engine. And then one of the interesting patterns that you see here is this split. So the data is flowing through here. It's going to Kinesis Firehose, and then it's going to just the Kinesis streams. And
Two versions of Kinesis.
two versions of Kinesis.
Why would they do that?
Well, the reason that they're doing that is that they can flow it through Kinesis Firehose into S3 without having to do any, run any servers, right? It's all serverless. They don't have to do any management of infrastructure on their side to make that happen. And then once it gets into S3, they're using Amazon Athena to analyze that data, and then Glacier to store, and retain it over time at low cost.
All right, but as the triggers, the events happen, that surely must need some EC2 in place there for processing.
Well, actually, in this case, you can see they're using Lambda. So we have Lambda functions. So once again, serverless, running various applications to, say, like one of the examples might be, that frac chem example we were just talking about, where they're having Lambda functions that are controlling the mixture of the solution out in the field.
Okay.
Okay? So once again, really interesting architecture, all based on serverless. And it's consumption-based. That was another point I wanted to make there. So some of the challenges that they had as they were going through and implementing this were moving or serialization at cloud scale. So in this case, they were using Kinesis and Lambda, and specifically Kinesis sharding to scale. Another one was this focus on active data. So I did this is my architecture talk with Tolga from Annika, and one of the things that they were doing there is they had connected tanks, and these tanks needed to go and be emptied every so often. And so they were using, that would be the active data where they're sending a message to a worker to go and empty a tank, versus the reporting data, that the manager might use to say, well, how many tanks did we empty last month, right?
Yeah. Actually, what's interesting about this particular slice of the energy industry, the chemical industry, the challenge that they face, something like how much liquid is in this tank, it's not as easy of a question as you might think, because these tanks aren't necessarily made out of the sturdiest stuff. This is plastic. This is materials that are safe, but however are susceptible to things like the sun. So if you've got this pile of chemicals out in the field, and you're able to see I've got about this much liquid in it, you can have an engineer check that 3 times a day, and it's going to have different numbers each time, even though the level hasn't changed, because the events and the impacts that they have on that system are going to be varied throughout the day. However, moving to data-driven models, you're able to get much more accurate and dial in much closer on the throughput that you've seen, mix the appropriate chemicals the right place, the right time, and get the right outputs from these systems.
Yeah, and so what we see in the design pattern here is that they're using Dynamo, and I didn't call it out on the previous slide, but Dynamo is on the slide, and they're using that for that active data so they can build metrics that are real-time for that worker out in the field, versus using S3 and Athena to do that historical analysis. And that's a pattern we'll see repeated. Another thing that they're doing is they're using IoT Device Manager to manage those devices out in the field. Because that's, once you start to, one device is maybe not that hard to manage.
Sure.
But once you start to deploy hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of devices, that becomes a major thing that you need to focus on.
And if you think about the number of devices and the number of sensors that you would need in just a single oil field implementation, it's staggering the amount of data you need to manage.
Well, if we think of that 20-20-20.
Yeah, 20-20-20.
That's a lot of management. Okay. Also, the ability to, not just create those reports, but view them. So, and then, as we mentioned on the previous slide, running all of this serverless so that it's easy to scale. The other piece that I did mention briefly was that the costs scale as well. So your costs scale along with your use because you're running in a consumption serverless model.
Exactly.
And then last but not least, one of the things that Annika has done is not just, so they created this development kit and this board to make it easy to prototype. They've created the software architecture so that you can use the AWS services to get started quickly. But they've also hit the right button there, integrated a whole development pipeline for you. So you can easily stand up a development stage, a test or QA stage, and a production stage using various AWS services like code commit, code pipeline, and code build to build that pipeline or build that solution. Okay, so it's the CI/CD. CI means?
Continuous integration.
CD?
Continuous disappointment. Delivery.
That was good. That was good. We did not practice that. That was good.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is an interesting piece about the way that our partners function. So we're talking a lot about the solution they developed here with the prototype board and the system that they put together so that you can do these things easily. But the partner's job is not to just build these things and hand these off. You see from CTO of TrueCar calls out that Annika themselves sat side by side with their teams. They didn't build this thing and hand it off. They made sure that this company knows what they're getting into and how to handle these things and how to work with these things long term. It's one of the great features of our partner program is the ability to have these resources that care about scale, not only delivering this project, but scaling your business along with you. Outcomes. So this is the key to any project, knowing where you're going and what's going to be delivered. FratChem was looking for improved quality. They got it. They were looking for lower costs. They got it in spades. And actually ongoing, they're able to minimize those costs by being more precise and more accurate and able to project much more clearly what those costs are going to be, when and where as well. What's really interesting is their business model shifted. They're no longer selling buckets of chemicals. They're selling a service, not a supply. So now they're able to look back and see how much you're going to need, when you're going to need it. I don't have to sell you these tanks. I'm just going to sell you the chemicals that you need when they're delivered. So the customer's happy because they're not buying tanks. They're just buying that thing they need for their business at the end of the day. Yep. Annika was pretty happy too. Their outcomes, repeatable patterns. So this board that they developed and this system that they developed and these CloudFormation templates they're able to execute based on these specific needs of the customers, that's repeatable. The specific implementation for FratChem is something that's going to be fairly bespoke and specific to the needs of that company, but the rest of it's fairly generic. Those patterns are pretty standard. Everyone's going to need to have the devices that they can manage. They're going to need to be able to handle firmware. They're going to need to be able to handle security. And they're able to now go to other customers and say, here's this thing that we know works, that works great, that we've built, and we can put this in place for you as well to drive your business in the same direction. They've also been able to drive down, from their perspective, the time to market of these solutions. So it will take them a good amount of time to do the first one. It was a lot of engineering work. It was a lot of software development. But the second one, third one, fourth one are a small fraction of that because they've put in the heavy lifting.
Well, so, and they've made it easy for all of you to go out and do that as well and take advantage of the lessons learned that they've had.
Exactly.
Okay.
So remember we said there's going to be a quiz?
We did say there's going to be 3 quizzes. So just raise your hand or come up to the mic if you think you know the answer. First question, why does their architecture use Kinesis Firehose?
Anyone?
All right.
They want to send the data directly to S3.
That's right.
Nicely
Send
done.
it to S3 without having any compute. Second question, and there's 3 questions. What service did Annika use to query that data once it was in S3? Athena. Boom. Yeah, rock and roll.
Nice work.
And then finally, how many connected devices are projected to be online by 2020? Everybody. 20 billion or more.
With a B. That's a big number.
That's a lot of things. Okay, moving on to example number 2, industrial IoT. So this is an example from a company called Hamlet, and Hamlet is a manufacturer of industrial valves. They had a question around how does IoT impact our business? They also had a second question around how does artificial intelligence impact our business? And what those things can give you is a view into preventative maintenance, but if they combine both of those things together, then they can go to predictive maintenance. So these valves are used in very precise. And let's just move on. So this was a project done with Siemens, and Siemens is one, so on our partner side, Siemens is an advanced technology partner. They are an APN competency partner, most recently with our industrial software competency.
Yeah, for anyone that's not familiar, our competency partners have gone through extensive vetting and have shown specific case studies and capabilities in areas. So when you're looking for a partner to do DevOps or a partner to do IoT, for example, we've got a short list of folks that we've done extensive work with that we can say, yes, you should absolutely choose these folks. And Siemens is a great example of someone who's done extensive work with us and with customers.
Yeah, it's a high bar to hit.
Yeah.
And the testing is fairly rigorous to make sure that they are following our best practices. And so they have a platform as a service called Siemens MindSphere. And MindSphere consists of applications or Mind apps that sit on top of MindSphere. And then there's MindConnect for the connectivity piece. And so the solution with Hamlet used MindSphere as their IoT platform, and then that's running on top of AWS. And here's a diagram of what that looks like. You can see we've got some connected valves. These valves have various things that they're looking at, like the temperature, the pressures, the humidity, the acoustics. So that's a really cool one. The valve has a microphone on it. And then things like vibration. And in the diagram here, we've got multiple valves that connect into a gateway device. The gateway device then allows for processing out in the field, and then that will go up into the cloud for well, let me get to that in a second. Let's talk about it. So the gateway allows for processing in the field, and it gives you the ability, this thing at the bottom of the screen here is a tablet that gives real-time analysis. So similar to what we saw with the Annika example, you've got the real-time analysis, and then you've got the maybe historical long-term analysis. So that data will flow up into the cloud, and it also gives the opportunity to use things like machine learning. So you're taking not just data for monitoring, but you can use that data over time to build machine learning models.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach functionally with the gateway in place there. So you've got both the ability to have engineers on site holding a tablet, troubleshooting, reviewing, making the adjustments that need to be made, and at the same time, the longer term analytics, building the reports to say, hey, based on what we've been recording from an audio perspective and how we heard this valve close the last 15 times and the pressures we're seeing, it's probably not going to be lasting too much longer. We need to take X, Y, Z steps. So on site, you can pull up your tablet and say, let's shut that guy off, take it out of service, make the relative reasonable adjustments to move these things forward without the need to necessarily connect to the back end or go through the extensive processes on the far side.
So let's take a look at what the architecture looks like. So here's an architecture diagram for the Hamlet solution. And we can see here's an on-premises, maybe it's a factory. We've got the Hamlet valve. I just put one here. There could be multiple. And once again, it's got these various sensors on it, the microphone being one of the critical pieces there because it's listening for when that valve opens and closes. And then we have the gateway device. That gateway device is running AWS Greengrass. And in this case, it's actually running machine learning models that have been trained using Amazon SageMaker up in the cloud. So they're taking that data, they're sending it up to the cloud, putting it in S3 and DynamoDB, and then using SageMaker to train those models. And then we're also using things like IoT Core and Amazon Analytics to look at the data, as well as doing the predictive maintenance and long-term monitoring inside of Siemens MindSphere. And here we see the security pieces that are running inside of MindSphere, as well as the device management. And then once again, all of that's running inside of AWS.
That's an interesting comparison there from our first architecture, which was did this device management through the AWS IoT service versus using the partner technology product here as well. From our perspective, it's whatever the customer needs to solve their problem.
Well, and this is a great example of a company like Siemens that has a long history of work in the industrial space, and they're able to apply that knowledge. using MindSphere. And so let's take a look. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about this is that they not only deployed Greengrass, but they deployed it inside a container. So they're running containers on that gateway device, and you can see multiple containers here that are running on that device out in the field. The other thing that's really cool is we have it here on stage. So this picture that you see on screen is this physical device here. And so at the end of the talk, please come up. We have Shai from Siemens here to answer questions about it and show you the valve. And just to end with a little quote from the CEO from Hamlet, right? This has been transformative because what they did, very similar to FracChem, where FracChem moved to a managed service model, Hamlet has moved from selling valves to selling valve hours. It's valves as a service. It's opening and closing valves as a service, which is so interesting, right? That you can move from a hardcore manufacturing company to a software as a service company, basically.
Yeah, and if you're in the industrial space and you need the command and control of these, the cost up front typically fairly high, and the risk that you're taking on managing and controlling your valves is extremely high. But when you're able to shift your model to say, I know how often I'm going to need to open and close this, I can do this based on, again, the outputs, not the random guess of how much we're going to use this. It's a much more financially responsible model for the customer to step into.
All right, time for another quiz. You want to walk through this one?
Sure. So what technology did Siemens use to build, train, deploy machine learning models quickly on AWS?
SageMaker.
SageMaker,
Boom.
Nicely done. Which service seamlessly extends AWS to edge devices so they can locally act on the data that's generated? Greengrass.
Yeah.
And what was the name of Kyle's dog? Chester
Ooh,
Copperpot.
yeah,
The full
first and last name.
Only when he's
Love
in
it.
trouble. Usually it's Chester, but yeah.
Yeah.
The Goonie, yep. All right. So the next example is going to be much closer to home, and you're probably all going to be extremely interested given the hour and the weather. Let's talk about espresso.
That is a very, back up
Sorry,
for a second.
sorry.
That's
Oh,
a
man.
very good looking
You're right,
cup
that
of
is
coffee.
a gorgeous cup of coffee. Where's that picture from?
So that is a cup of coffee. I took this picture. This is a cup of coffee that I had in Seattle at KEXP, which is the U.S. headquarters for La Marzocco.
Funny you should mention La Marzocco.
Yeah. So, and this happens to be a use case around La Marzocco. So they're a manufacturer of high-end espresso machines.
Yeah. You've probably had coffee from these machines. When you did, you might have felt like a star and it would have cost you a couple bucks, but we're not able to talk to who specifically is purchasing these and rebranding them. But they're extremely high-end, very good quality machines.
Yes.
And they're expensive. Like startup prices for a coffee shop, it's staggering if you're going to purchase a piece of equipment like this.
But they're the leading
standard,
manufacturer. And so, and they had a standard sales model, right? With service contracts and in-house engineering. But what they wanted to do is they wanted to look at their business and just like some of the other businesses we've seen, they wanted to get closer to their customers, right? They were looking for ways to increase their revenue. Essentially, they had saturated the market. And then they also wanted to, if they're the leading brand, they want to maintain that brand. And see how they could get creative with R&D by getting more feedback directly from their customers.
Yeah, that's a big piece of this. As a company, Amazon is a huge fan of driving based on customer feedback. If you've got a device in the field that's not connected to the internet, that you can't manage and you can't monitor, you're not getting the feedback on the performance. You don't know how it's doing unless someone calls and say, oh yeah, that thing fell over and it broke again. I'm so frustrated, come out here and fix it. Don't necessarily have to go in that route anymore with these capabilities.
Right. And so some of the challenges is they had zero visibility into those devices once they were deployed out in the field. No understanding of the location, the health, the operating status after it leaves the factory. And then the distributor sales channel was limited and customer engagement opportunities to maintain the relationship and upsell or cross-sell complementary products and services just wasn't there. And then the traditional CapEx expense or sales model prevents revenue growth into the secondary resale markets.
Yeah.
So some significant challenges there. So they turned to another one of our partners by the name of Relayr.
Yeah. And might not be surprising to you that the coffee company did not have these skills in-house to build and develop this type of platform. Completely reasonable to reach out for help from someone like Relayr.
So they reached out to Relayr to take a look at their business and analyze it. And similar to the other businesses that we've been talking about today, they recognized that there was an opportunity by integrating IoT into both their existing machines so they could retrofit them, as well as outfitting new machines. And they're looking at having about 17,500 devices connected over the next 5 years. But they could take that connectivity, connect it up to AWS, and build on top of that, right? Build dashboards, build machine learning models to understand what's happening out in the field. Once again, doing that predictive maintenance.
This talks very closely to a message that we're also familiar with, focusing on the customer. The customer does not want to buy a big fancy coffee machine. We've got quite a few technical types in here where we can be very nerdy about our specific things. Maybe we do want a very particular coffee machine. But most folks, they want a cup of coffee. They don't get up and think, man, I'm really excited to go play with a coffee machine.
Right.
So you're able to now provide espresso as a service.
Espresso as a service. So,
How?
How? So once again, they're consuming many of the same services, and they have, the same type of serverless architecture. S3 data lake, they're using MQTT for connectivity. They have built their own analytics tool, and they've built dashboards that are not only used by Marzocco to keep track of their assets, but also by the baristas to continually monitor the coffee machines that are on their premises. So, and then the field software updates are managed by the Relayr platform and automatically go down to the coffee machines when needed.
That's the really interesting piece that you've probably heard as a common thread throughout this, using machine learning and being able to look at this data and understand how these machines perform and what the energy draw is in a particular pump and what the resistance is in various areas. They're now able to predict when these machines are going to stop performing the way they're expected to. And since you're buying this by the cup, it's not on you to know that, it's on them. They need to be the ones that understand when to send out that engineer and give you the hand that you need because that pump is about to go out.
Well, and I think one of the other cool things is because it gives them visibility into the use of the machine, they can say, oh, well, we're seeing that sales are dropping off in this city or this region. And then they can work with those customers to figure out, well, why is that? And then maybe do a promotion or it's just a really interesting way to get closer to the customer and to grow their business model. And I didn't talk about it on the previous slide, but they were able to grow their available market by 30% by changing to this or adding this as a business model.
From stagnant growth to a 30% increase in addressable market.
Yeah, so espresso as a service.
Being able to go from not seeing any of their equipment, not knowing what's going on in the field unless they sent an engineer out to take a look, to seeing thousands upon thousands of coffee machines that are doing their good work or questionable work and need some attention.
Yep. And so we have a great quote from the CEO of Marzocco saying that this is the heart of their future. I love it.
Yeah.
It's darn good coffee. And Relayr, why did Relayr choose to work with AWS? Well, there's a number of different reasons for that. So the support they get from us, the partner team, I'm proud to say, the reliability of the platform, obviously scalability.
Yep, and the flexibility as well. They've got several machines online today. I don't know the exact number, but they're projecting towards tens of thousands of these things. So they need to be able to follow us from a scalability perspective, or we need to be able to follow them. And just like their customers don't want to pay for the machine, they don't want to pay for all this infrastructure up front. So we need to be able to ride along, give them the same courtesy that they're extending to their customers.
And so I have many axioms that I've come up with while I've been in this role. One of them is that everybody wants to design a perfect architecture, but it's way better to design architecture that's fungible, right? That's flexible, that you can replace and change. And we've seen this week, the pace of innovation is outstanding, or it's incredible. And so understanding that you just need to design a good enough architecture and be able to iterate on that rapidly, because who knows where we're going to be, a year from now, or even 6 months from now.
Yeah.
Having that flexibility is really important.
Absolutely.
Okay, time for our last quiz.
How well we've been paying attention. Excited? All right.
Let's see.
So what service did Relayr choose to manage their containers?
Oh, we had it on the slide. I don't know if we talked about it.
ECS.
There we go. Yeah.
What product led to a 30% increase in La Marzocco's
That's
market?
an easy one.
What was that product?
EAAS?
Was it Espresso as a
Espresso
service?
as a service.
They went from selling
It's a new platform.
machines
EAAS.
to selling cups of coffee, tiny cups of coffee.
Yeah, and then finally, what would make Chester really happy? We
Does anyone
talked about
remember?
this. It's a common theme. There we go.
He likes high response rates. Just fill out your survey. He does like treats and also fives.
Well, everybody likes treats.
That's true.
Yeah. He's so cute. Okay, so in conclusion, let's kind of bring this home, right? Let's talk about the business value summary first. What are some things that we learned here today, hopefully, right?
So
That
we're able to reduce time to market. Functionally, if we're able to identify patterns that are repeatable, and we're able to build into systems that are structurally sound and flexible enough, you are able to get your new ideas, your new concepts, your new products out faster. Additionally, you can't improve what you can't measure. So once you're able to measure things like the life of your valves, the pressure on either side, the quality of the coffee coming out of a tap, you're able to then improve those iteratively, little by little. And once you figure out what needs to be changed, chances are you'll be able to push out some sort of firmware update or make some adjustment to your algorithms to say, here's how we're going to make these things run better for our customers long term.
well, and the way that you're able to measure that is through connectivity,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, gives you a better ability to know your customer, because that's what matters. It doesn't matter if you have the best widget in the world and you think it's super cool. If it's not what your customers need, what your customers want, and what they consider to be success, it does not matter at all.
And then I love this. We'll talk this shift in business models, moving to a managed service or moving from a product, just being a manufacturer, to being a service provider.
Yeah.
And then some of the design patterns that we've seen here are repeated over and over. So this idea of fungible designs, I just mentioned that, right? This idea of having architectures and focusing on being fungible and being able to change things over time is really important. One of the patterns that we see that really helps with that is things like serverless, things like containers and microservices.
Yeah.
That's a really important piece.
Yeah, in the core of our AWS IoT service, the whole concept, we like to look at the undifferentiated heavy lifting going on in the ecosystem. Everyone that's working in IoT, they're going to have devices. They're going to need to manage those devices, secure those devices. They're going to need to be able to push out firmware updates to those devices. They're going to need to be able to catalog and list those devices. So our basic service will do all those things for you. There's no need to go reinvent that wheel every time. They're all going to be talking through some sort of queue-based platform that's going to be sending messages back and forth. So AWS IoT is designed to be extremely flexible and fill those gaps where your platform needs it.
Yeah. And then we've seen, and pretty much all of these architectures have focused around serverless, right? So why manage servers if you don't have to?
Yeah, never pay an OS license unless you absolutely need to.
And then one of the things that I'm really passionate about is edge compute. I know we had at least one person that was in my edge compute workshop earlier this week. But that ability to run machine learning models at the edge it's driving this business. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting things actually about the frac cam example. Something I had never thought about until getting into a few different partners that work in that industry. There's no connectivity at an oil field or out there in the middle of nowhere. There's tons of energy requirements. There's tons of functional requirements around managing fluids, managing power. There's no phone line that anybody ran out there. So best case scenario, you've got some cellular, but at the end of the day, the edge compute, if you're going to be making quick decisions, you need to be able to embed part of that decision-making matrix into that equipment.
And then, of course, manage those things over time.
Yep.
And then last but not least, a focus on using AWS partners where appropriate, right? And this is, once again, a great example of where our competency program helps vet partners for you to make it easier for you to build, prototype, and get to market.
Yeah, it's a strange new world for most of these companies, so the fact that they have folks to reach out to is a huge boon to their businesses overall.
And then just to re-emphasize this shift in business models, right? What we're seeing, and we saw with all three of those examples, is a shift from product to either a managed service or all the way to a software as a service. And that's because companies are moving from this model where they used to sell a product or a license, and by utilizing the cloud, they're able to move to a subscription, and that gives them all those benefits of being closer to their customer, growing their revenue base or their market.
So in looking at this holistically, if you look back 10 years, do you think that this would be something that's even remotely achievable?
No, this was totally inconceivable 10 years ago.
It's an interesting point, but those things change.
They do. Change, so another one of my axioms is change is the only constant, but the rate of change is ever increasing.
Yep, and the expectation is that it's not going to slow down anytime soon. So I'm excited to see what all of you are going to do with these services and these opportunities and which customers you're going to be helping revolutionize their workloads and what strange business model shifts from making your own cup of coffee to coffee as a service.
That's espresso as a service. I love it.
Need everyone to do us a quick favor, though.
Yep.
Can everyone pull out your phone? Everybody, come on.
Hold on.
Phone's out. Unless you already had your phone out, we're texting.
I put mine in. It's down there. Sorry.
So now let's all, in unison,
the virtual phone.
keep us out of the doghouse with Chester and fill out the survey. So please, please, please fill out the survey. We're looking for a high response rate. Chester is a huge fan of the number 5. I don't know why it's one of his things. Doesn't have to be your answer, but if it's not what you're seeing here today, come on, let us know. What could we do better? Give us the feedback. We're here for you. So if we're not hitting the marks you were expecting, please let us know. And huge, huge thanks for everybody coming out, staying with us today on this dreary afternoon right before the big party.
And like I said, if you want to get in touch with us, that's our contact information. We have the Hamlet valve up here.
And you have to come play with us.
Come check it out.
Tank of a valve.
And cool. We have the dev kit from Annika here as well, so come check that out, and we'll be here if you have any questions.
We do not have the coffee machine, sadly.
Man, we're going to get marked down for that. That was
true.
a bummer. But thank you all so much. We hope you have had a great reInvent and enjoy the party tonight.
Thanks.